when I bought the lake cabin. I thought I was escaping conflicted and inviting it. After 20 years as a police detective in a major metro department, retirement hit me like a wave of silence. No sirens, no paperwork, no bodies, just long mornings and creaky knees. I wanted peace, and I found it in a tucked-away A-frame cabin nestled beside Rockridge Lake, where the water kissed the pines and the loons sang like clockwork at dawn. The property was technically adjacent to Rockridge Shores, a tidy HOA-governed community on the other side of the tree line that didn't concern me. I'd done my due diligence. My parcel was private, unrestricted land, grandfathered in before the HOA ever existed. No dues, no meetings, no rules. I smiled every time I reminded myself of that. Then came the envelope, thick ivory cardstock with gold embossed lettering, Rockridge Shores Property Alliance welcome packet. Inside were 67 pages of covenants, bylaws, and penalties. They had rules about trash bins, acceptable lawn ornaments, even the size and color of American flags. It was laughably until it wasn't. At first, I ignored it. Surely a mistake. But within a week, the letters turned to fines, and the fines turned to people. It began subtly. A strange car parked just past my driveway, someone snapping photos of my firewood stack. Then a man with a clipboard knocked and introduced himself. As Ron from the compliance committee, he demanded access to inspect my dock, citing a shared shoreline policy. I shut the door in his face. The next visit came from Marjorie Clayton, HOA president and self-appointed queen of the lake. Mid-60s, stiff blonde bob, posture like a rifle. She wore a pastel pantsuit like armor and held that clipboard like it was a gavel. "You're in violation of several property standards," she began without introduction. "Your dock railings are unapproved. The flag exceeds regulation dimensions, and open wood burning is prohibited." "This is private land," I said, "not subject to your rules." Her eyes narrowed, lips curling as if I'd spit on her lawn. "Your parcel borders HOA managed shoreline that gives us joint enforcement rights." I reached into the drawer near my porch and slapped the original deed and survey documents onto the railing. Not according to the county, not according to the state, and definitely not according to me. Marjorie didn't flinch. She just straightened her spine and gave me the smile of someone who doesn't lose. "If you won't comply voluntarily, we'll have to escalate." I watched her walk away with the calculated grace of a chess player mid-match. I knew her type: people who crave power but dress it in polite concern. The HOA wasn't about safety or community, it was about control. Over the next month, the pressure mounted: anonymous complaints, mysterious code enforcement notices nailed to my gate, even a drone hovering above my backyard. Each time, I documented everything: screenshots, photos, names. I wasn't paranoid, I was preparing. Then came the night my security lights tripped just after midnight. I stepped onto the porch with my flashlight and spotted two men standing near my truck. They wore matching windbreakers and baseball caps with generic police patches. One turned toward me and flashed a badge. Something about it felt off, too shiny, too fast. I asked what they wanted. "We're here on a nuisance complaint," one said. "Need to inspect the premises." "Which department?" I asked. "County enforcement." Wrong answer. My cabin was under state jurisdiction, and I knew everyone from the county. I kept my expression neutral, stepping back inside. But I wasn't retreating, I was activating the emergency beacon hidden in the wall near my gun cabinet. A silent signal, a habit from my past life. It notified exactly one person: my son, Jake. They thought I was some grumpy retiree in flannel. They had no idea I used to hunt down people just like them. Or that Jake, my only son, had followed in my footsteps, only higher. He was now with the state attorney general's office, and he'd just been waiting for me to call. The two men advanced like they owned the place. One kept a hand on his hip, where a holster bulged beneath his windbreaker. The other scanned my cabin, nodding at details like he was conducting a real investigation. Their badges, flimsy plastic rectangles clipped to their vests, caught the porch light, and my suspicion hardened into certainty. These weren't officers, they were actors, dangerous ones. I stayed calm, keeping my posture easy. "Mind showing me your ID again?" Slowly this time, the taller one, square-jawed with a cheap crew cut, glared. "Sir, we don't have time for games. This is a health and safety inspection, no warrant," I asked, letting the question hang in the pine-scented air. "You're interfering with an active investigation," the shorter one growled. "Of what, exactly?" The taller one stepped toward me, and I could smell his cologne, synthetic musk, too loud for law enforcement. "That's it, we're coming in." He reached for the screen door, and that's when the shadows moved. Three figures emerged from the darkness behind them, quite fast and fully armed. Tactical vests, real badges, silent precision. My son led the formation, eyes like ice, voice low and firm, hands where I can see them. The taller man froze mid-step, his hand twitched toward his waist. But he wasn't fast enough. Jake was already there, weapon drawn, barrel steady. "Try me," Jake said coldly. The fake cops raised their hands, confusion washing over them as real law enforcement closed in. Within seconds they were disarmed, face down, cuffed, and breathless. "You're under arrest for impersonating police officers," one of Jake's partners said. "You have the right to remain silent," the shorter one spat into the dirt. "We're contractors. We're allowed to conduct enforcement." Jake crouched beside him, pulling the man's wallet from his back pocket. "Redstone Asset Protection, out of state. No license to operate here, no authority, no badges." He stood and turned to me. "Looks like your HOA president's been busy." I nodded. I had a feeling. Jake's team had been monitoring the HOA for weeks. The complaints weren't just isolated harassment, they were part of a broader scheme. Rockridge Shores was using Redstone, a private security firm, to push non-compliant homeowners off their properties. They'd already succeeded in 4 cases: fined, threatened, and driven out. Marjorie Clayton, behind her manicured smile, was orchestrating a hostile takeover. "She's pocketing kickbacks from redevelopment deals," Jake explained. "Push out residents, flip the homes, profit your property. Prime shoreline real estate. She wanted it, badly." I looked out at the lake, dark and still, reflecting nothing but stars. "She sent fakes to scare an ex-cop. Bold move. Desperate move," Jake corrected. "She knows we're circling." As the fake officers were loaded into cruisers, their arrogance collapsed. One broke down entirely, begging for a deal. Said he didn't know it was illegal, that he was just following orders. Jake didn't flinch. "That excuse hasn't worked in a long time." We watched them disappear down the gravel road, red and blue lights painting the pines. I stood silent beside my son, the night wind brushing through the trees. "You okay, Dad?" I looked at him, grown now, sharp, vigilant, and felt the old pride stir. He wasn't just good at his job, he was better than I ever was. "I'm fine," I said, "but I'm done playing defense." He grinned. "Good, because we're not finished." Jake handed me a manila folder, thick with documents, court orders, financial records, witness statements. It was a war chest of evidence, and at the center of it all was Marjorie Clayton. "She's next," he said simply, and I believed him. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Marjorie Clayton wasn't just an overbearing HOA president with a clipboard and a grudge. She was the nucleus of a corrupt machine that had infiltrated every layer of Rockridge Shores. HOA dues were being siphoned into shell companies. Fines were inflated and falsified. Redstone Asset Protection had been quietly deployed to enforce compliance, bypassing all legal channels, and none of it was legal. Jake's task force, more surgical and deadly efficient, was now in full operational mode. While residents of Rockridge Shores enjoyed their morning lattes and afternoon dog walks, surveillance vans circled quietly. Microphones were planted, laptops cloned, phones tapped under warrant, and in the center of it all, Marjorie, her digital footprint was damning. Emails to Redstone execs instructing them to neutralize resistance. Spreadsheets documenting which properties were to be targeted next. Wire transfers from HOA accounts to offshore banks in Belize, laundered through a landscaping company. She personally recommended. Jake slid one of those emails across my kitchen table. It was addressed to her board. "We cannot tolerate rogue residents like Mr. Kincaid. If traditional enforcement fails, apply pressure through external channels. Use discretion." "Mr. Kincaid, that was me. She really wanted you out, Jake," said I chuckled darkly. "I tend to have that effect on tyrants." We began collecting testimonies from neighbors, people who had quietly suffered under Marjorie's rule. Most had been too afraid to speak until now. A widowed veteran, Mr. Langley, shared how his boat had been towed and his property leaned over a disputed shed. Dana, a single mother of 2, had lost her home after repeated fines for non-holiday decorations. A young couple had their offer rescinded on a home after Marjorie told the seller they were not the right fit. Jake's team cross-referenced every case. The pattern was undeniable: target, isolate, fine, and force a sale. Then flip the house through one of 3 local brokers, each of whom had ties to Marjorie's daughter-in-law's development firm. Classic racket, dressed up in neighborhood watch clothing. And now it was all collapsing. Jake obtained a sealed warrant for a pre-dawn raid. While the rest of Rockridge Shores slept, his team quietly surrounded Marjorie's stately home on Alderberry Lane. Curtains drawn, porch spotless, flag perfectly scented, a house that screamed order. Behind it, disorder so deep it had crossed into organized crime. When she opened the door, freshly blow-dried hair, robe-belted Titchik was standing there with a badge and a warrant. "Marjorie Clayton, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, impersonation of law enforcement through proxy agents, misuse of public funds, and racketeering." Her expression cracked like thin ice under pressure. "You can't be serious. I'm the president of the HOA. You're making a mistake," Jake motioned. And she was cuffed gently but firmly. From behind her, her husband emerged, confused, still in pajama pants. "Call our attorney," she snapped at him. He looked at Jake, and then at me standing on the curb in my flannel and boots. "You're the guy from the cabin," he muttered. "Yep," I said. "The one who didn't cave." We watched as she was escorted to the cruiser, lips pressed tight, still trying to calculate a way out, but the game was over. The feds had her bank records, her emails. Her minions had already cracked. Even Red CEO was flipping to avoid prison time. Rockridge Shores wasn't just losing a president, it was shedding a parasite. Later that day, I walked down to the community bulletin board. A crowd had gathered. Someone had posted a copy of the arrest warrant. Others were reading aloud snippets of the charges. Faces shifted from confusion to shock to a quiet kind of relief. She was ruining this place. Dana whispered beside me. Not anymore, I said. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines and the lake shimmered orange and gold, I sat on my dock and listened. No drone overhead. No surveillance vans. No phony inspectors. Just loons. Water peace. But justice wasn't finished tomorrow. The board elections that would be voided, audits would begin. Class action lawsuits would be filed, and I would testify, because sometimes standing up doesn't just protect your land, it frees your entire neighborhood. Marjorie's arrest didn't just rattle the gates of Rockridge Shores, it cracked them wide open. In the days that followed, the community transformed. People who once nodded cautiously behind blinds were now speaking freely at town halls. Years of fear, resentment, and silent suffering poured into the open like a dam had finally burst. Homeowners brought receipts, letters, and emails. Stories poured out of intimidation, illegal surveillance, and bogus fines that bled savings dry. And now finally, someone was listening. The state attorney's office filed over 30 charges across 5 individuals, including 2 HOA board members, Redstone executives, and of course, Marjorie herself. With the HOA board officially dissolved by emergency court order, a temporary oversight committee was installed, made up of actual residents who cared more about neighborhood harmony than landscaping. Uniformity. Jake briefed me on the wider picture. Red's been running the same scam in 4 other states, he said one afternoon, flipping through a binder thick with evidence that Marjorie was one of their most aggressive clients. But she got sloppy, too greedy, too visible, and too used to people rolling over, I added. She didn't count on someone like you. I gave him a sideways glance. Someone with a stubborn streak and a security system wired into the state police, he laughed. Exactly. But it wasn't just my persistence, it was the people. Dana, the single mom who lost her home, was now organizing a class action lawsuit with 10 other families. Mr. Langley, the retired vet, had volunteered to help rebuild the damaged docks the HOA had destroyed. Even the young couple who nearly backed out of buying their home decided to stay now that the poison had been removed. And the poison wasn't just one woman. It was the illusion that power can't be challenged. I decided to do more than sit back and enjoy the silence. With the old HOA clubhouse sitting vacant, I placed a modest bid at the county auction and won. It had once been a fortress of manipulation. I turned it into a free community access center. Open workshops, town potlucks, and lakeside safety courses. The first event we held was a flag-raising ceremony. Dana's kids held the rope. The same flag Marjorie once tried to fine me for now flew proudly over Rockridge Shores. Poetic justice, I suppose. One evening, as the summer sun melted into the lake, Jake joined me on the dock. He looked older than I remembered, sharper lines on his face, eyes more tired, but there was a lightness now, a calm I hadn't seen in him for years. Feels like justice, doesn't it? He said, tossing a pebble into the water. I replied, not the kind with headlines, the quiet kind. He nodded, the kind that sticks. There was a long pause between us. The good kind, the kind where words aren't needed. I'm proud of you, Dad. That one caught me. I turned away, blinking into the sunset. You did the heavy lifting, kid. I just made enough noise to stir the hornet's nest, and then let the right people sting back. We both laughed at that. News stations picked up the story, dubbing it the lakefront sting. They loved the twist and ex-cop getting harassed by fake cops only for the real cops to step in. It made for good headlines, sure, but the real win wasn't on the news. It was in every conversation that now happened without fear. Every front porch no longer patrolled. Every family that stayed, instead of fleeing. I didn't just reclaim my land, I helped reclaim a community. Now, when people ask me about the cabin, I tell them it's more than just wood, stone, and lake views. It's a reminder that bullies wear all kinds of uniforms, sometimes even fake ones, and standing up to them doesn't require rage or revenge, just resolve, and maybe a very well-connected sun. As loons called softly across the water and the dock creaked beneath us. Jake pulled something from his bag, a brass plaque. He held it up and grinned. Thought you might want this on the clubhouse. I read the engraving. Greater than, for those who don't back down. Welcome to Free Shore. I smiled, my throat tight. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration.